Hi everyone, I'm Shelly from There's No Place Like Home at redheadmom8.wordpress.com. I've been making so many videos lately on relaxed homeschooling, and it dawned on me the other day that I've never actually made a video about what relaxed homeschooling is. Relaxed homeschooling is basically just a combination of some structured homeschooling with unschooling philosophies. If you're not familiar with unschooling is simply living life as if there were no such thing as school. Unschoolers usually embrace the mindset that learning happens naturally in all forms when a child is just left to explore their own interests and just to see what's in the world, discover things, and that kids don't really need to be coerced into doing any sort of structured learning. So that's a really in a nutshell what unschooling is, and there's so much more to it. And if you're really interested in it, I suggest that you read some books by John Holt, because he is really considered to be the father of unschooling, and he really did shape the way that I homeschool. So as I was saying earlier, relaxed homeschooling is basically a hybrid of some structured homeschooling mixed with unschooling. Now, for whatever reason, there are some people like me who really do embrace a lot of what unschooling says about children. You know, I truly believe that kids are natural learners, and I can see it in my own kids' lives, you know, how much more easily they will learn things if they're actually interested in them, and if they are the ones who actually initiated it. So I definitely agree with a lot of what unschooling has to say. The reason that I do not go all in with unschooling, which I did for 2 years, the reason that we stopped unschooling and actually kind of moved more towards a relaxed homeschooling is simply because I've got 10 kids in the house. I need structure. And we weren't really having much of that structure with unschooling. It started to get a bit too chaotic here. And I know that there are people who will argue that you can have structure with unschooling, but for us, it just didn't work out that way. So what I did was, while I do still really embrace how easily children do learn on their own and how children learn in their own time, I have started incorporating more structured schoolwork into our homeschooling days. So relaxed homeschooling might include a little bit of sometimes seat work, or maybe some unit studies, hands-on learning. But it's something that does not take up a really long time. Like, a lot of times there are homeschoolers who really do follow more of a school at home schedule. And if you ask them how long their homeschool day takes, they will say that it takes, 5, 6, sometimes even 7 hours a day. And that's not really the case. Actually, that's not the case at all with relaxed homeschooling. With relaxed homeschooling, our structured learning time is minimal. I would say that for my 7 youngest kids, we usually take between 2.5 and 3.5 hours a day to complete all of our structured schoolwork. And the only reason that it takes that long is because I do math separately with each individual child. So if they were actually doing math at the same time, it would take even less time than that. So what ends up happening is, since we are only homeschooling for 2.5, 3.5, sometimes 4 at the most hours a day for all of these children, for 7 of them, mind you. Now, I am homeschooling 9 this year, but my high schoolers are pretty much on their own. That's why I usually just talk about my 7 youngest. But they have the rest of the day to explore their own interests. And I really do see how that has more of a benefit to their learning than what sitting in a chair for 6 hours could do for them. And they're not idle in this time. During this time, my kids could be making Play-Doh. Today, my kids, they carved a pumpkin, and they went outside and they planted pumpkin seeds. And the other week, we had cantaloupe, and my daughter took some little flower pots and planted cantaloupe seeds in there. They make paper dolls. They make things from around the house. They collect boxes and toilet paper rolls and other odds and ends that we have. And they make little machines that they play with. And they're always doing something that involves them to think a lot. And it comes so much more naturally to them than if I say to them, I want you to sit down at this table and I want you to do A, B, and C for our project. that there's really no connection there. There's no initiative for them to want to learn. There's no reason for them to know this stuff. So while my kids will do the things, it doesn't really matter as much to them as what they're doing in their own time. And that really does make a lot of sense, because even as adults, if we're told that we have to do something, say if you're at your job and you're told that you have to do something, you do it and you do your best, but you don't really have the interest as if you were doing something on your own at home, something that you really wanted to explore and something that you made up your mind that you were going to do it. So you can't blame them. There really is a difference between doing things because you want to and doing things that you're told to. But with that being said, I do have to say that our structured learning time together is not for naught. Does that make sense? It's not for nothing. We really do. It's a great bonding time for my kids and I to be together, and they really do enjoy a lot of the things that we learn. And I try to incorporate their interests as much as possible into what we do. I try to incorporate their learning styles. That's why we do a whole mixture of things when we're homeschooling. We don't use just one method of learning. So that's really what relaxed homeschooling is. It is just taking a little bit of structured learning and then allowing your children the rest of the day to really explore and learn on their own. Now, I do want to say that now for me, the reason that I started putting some structured learning in our day was because it was less chaotic. But I do know that there are other people who really do find that it's a comfort to them to know that they are at least covering some things with their kids. And you know what, even for me, I'm pretty type A. So to know that I actually have something on a list that I'm going to do with my kids, it really does help my type A heart to feel better, knowing that I have, my little list of things that I know that I can check off if I need to. Does that mean that I don't think that my kids are learning in the rest of the time? No, that's just a personality quirk that I have, and it's nothing on their part at all. But another thing that I did want to add about relaxed homeschooling is that what I have found is that in our house, at least, relaxed homeschooling actually happens in 3 phases. If you see my camera shaking, my cat is bumping it. So she always does this during my videos. But anyway, so relaxed homeschooling, at least in our house, happens in 3 phases. And it really has sculpted the way that we approach it in our house now. So what I have found is that from kindergarten until around 2nd or 3rd grade, that is what I call the foundational phase. That is when the kids are learning how to read, they're learning how to write, and they're learning how to do basic math. And so during those grades or ages, so from kindergarten, 1st, 2nd, sometimes 3rd, it just depends on how far advanced a child is with reading and math at this time. But around the primary years, that is what I consider to be the foundational phase. So all that I do with the children that are in that age are the 3 R's. I do reading with them, writing, and of course phonics is mixed in with that. And they do math. And for our read alouds, I do incorporate a lot of science-based books or a lot of history-based books. But that is all that I'm doing. I am setting a good foundation for them to build upon. Now, the phase after that, the group that I usually call my middles, which is around 4th through 8th grade, that's what I call the buffet phase. This is the phase where I will introduce my kids to all sorts of topics so that they can get a good sense of everything that there is out there in the world to explore. Well, not everything, because no one can teach a child everything, but I do really give them a good snippet of things all across the board through history, through science, through every subject that you can think of. That is when I usually incorporate unit studies, is during this age, between 4th and 8th grade. Because they've already had a good firm foundation in the 3 R's. And now that they have that, they're ready to expand upon that in their learning about the world around them. And they're able to actually incorporate the skills that they learn better by maybe notebooking or journaling, sometimes even writing reports. Yeah, my kids do write those sometimes. Not very often, but they write them sometimes. So that's what we do during that stage. So that's the second stage, is the buffet phase. So then the third phase for high schoolers, I actually call that the learning to adult phase. I know that there are a lot of people who really stress over homeschooling high school. And that's why there are so many people out there who always say, I don't know, I might send my kids to school for high school because it's such a huge responsibility. But my thoughts on that are, at least in my school district, I know that I read an article in the paper a few years ago, and there was a large number of students graduating with a 4th grade reading level. So I honestly am not too worried about not teaching my kids on an equal level with the high schools. And what I've actually found is, with my high schoolers, I think that it's more important to make sure that they learn how to get out and to do things in, quote, the real world that they're going to do as an adult than it would be if they were to sit in a school building for 6 or 7 hours a day. Now, that's not to say that I don't give my high schoolers any structured work. They do. They do have structured work. And actually, the high school age is when I actually do start breaking my kids' work into subjects, which, if you've seen my other videos, you know that I am of the firm belief that since life is not broken into subjects, your homeschooling doesn't have to be. But for whatever reason it is, I do tend to start breaking their work into subjects more for high school. And I think that it really depends upon what their plans are. So, you know, my son at this point, he would like to be a photographer. He's actually talked about being a naturalist. But at this point, he does not want to go to college. And I'm okay with that. I am not a parent that really pushes their child into college. I want my kids to go if it's a choice that they've made, because if it's something that you're forcing them to do, they're not going to give it their all. And chances are you might end up wasting a whole lot of money. So, you know, I have him, and then I have my daughter, who is also in high school this year, and she does plan at this point to go into college. So a lot of what I do with them during their homeschool day is geared towards the things that they are interested in, because, you know, for the most part, the careers that your kids are going to pursue as adults are going to involve the things that they're interested in. At least I'm hoping that that's how it's going to be. You know, for my kids, I don't want my kids to go out there and do something just because they feel like they have to. I want them to go out there, and I want them to do something that they have a passion for. So that's really what this is about. So anyway, getting back to the learning to be an adult. So what this means is that although my kids in high school do have structured learning that gets written on the board every day for them to do, what ends up happening is kids who are in high school often have more outside things to do than those who are younger than them. You know, a lot of them have part-time jobs. A lot of them are being mentored. A lot of them have a lot of extracurricular activities. And sometimes they're doing more things with friends. And I find value in all of these things, as much value, if not more, as factoring, you know, a polynomial, for example. So, for example, my 24-year-old son, he just lives a couple of blocks away from us. And oftentimes he will call and ask for my 17-year-old son to go and help him with things. And I don't have a problem with that. Because the thing is that when my 17-year-old is out there helping his older brother with things like putting a bookshelf together, going to play frisbee golf, helping to give the dog a flea bath, going to the car dealership, all of these things that he is doing are things that he is going to have to know how to do in the real world. And again, I just think that having those skills are really, really important. And I think that when kids are in the traditional school setting for 6-7 hours a day, those skill sets are not given any time at all. So a lot of kids are graduating with not knowing how to do anything in the real world. And I want my kids to know how to be adults. And they're not going to know that if you don't give them the time to do that. So what this means for this phase is that I'm okay with them setting their schoolwork aside for the day to go do things that are actually out and about and are showing them how things are going to get done or how things are supposed to get done. I'm okay with that. And you know, I do set Fridays aside for makeup work, so there are times that they're making up work on Fridays. But I've come to the realization, it used to bother me when my older kids used to have stuff to do all the time. I used to say, well, you're always out doing A, B, and C when you should be at home doing your history. But the fact of the matter is, you know, I have to weigh it, you know. What is going to, in the long run, benefit my teenager more? Reading about Hammurabi's code or learning how things get done in everyday life? So it's a balance. I'm not saying that you should never do schoolwork with your high schoolers. Yes, my kids have schoolwork every single day, but what I'm saying is that at this point in time, I am perfectly happy with allowing them to go do other things because there is value in everyday learning, and I am seeing that more and more as my kids get older. And another thing that I do want to add before I go is that, I did graduate my first homeschooler last June, and she was working a part-time job most of the year. And her part-time job, it was barely part-time. She was working a good 30 hours a week. And you know what? Now this was my academic child. You know, before this, she was my child who liked to learn with textbooks. She didn't want anything to do with any other kind of learning. She really liked textbooks. And she always had that mindset. But when she started working 30 hours a week, she really started to fall behind on the textbook learning, and it really bothered me at first. You know, she used to come home and I used to say to her, but you didn't do this and you didn't do that. Did you get to this yet? Well, when was the last time that you did this? But then I realized, you know, she's out in the workforce, you know. She was getting Employee of the Month. She was getting like Regional Employee of the Month. She was visiting art museums with friends. She was going to cosplay conventions, to concerts. She was going to Special Olympics events. So, no, she wasn't in them. Her friend's brother participates in them. But she was out and about, and she was doing all of these things, and that was when I realized, why am I so worried on all of this textbook, all these textbook assignments that she's missing? Because I don't remember a whole lot of what I learned in high school. Do you? You know, the only stuff that I really remember from high school are the things that I wanted to learn about. You know, I remember things from Greek mythology because I wanted to learn about Greek mythology. I remember things from theater arts because I wanted to learn theater arts. And I remember a lot from my parenting class, and thank heavens, because I have 11 kids now. But all of those other things that I took, college algebra, trig, Western Civ, as much as I might have liked those teachers, I have not used any of those ever unless it has been to homeschool my kids. So that's just my little tidbit right there. So if you have any questions about relaxed homeschooling, leave a comment. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed yet, I would love for you to do that. And I hope you have a great day.